Emma clutched her mother's hand tightly as they walked through the crowded streets of London. At just 7 years old, she had already endured more medical procedures than most adults would face in a lifetime. The bright red scarf wrapped around her small head covered the evidence of her recent treatments. But nothing could hide the sparkle of excitement in her green eyes. Sarah, Emma's mother, watched her daughter's face light up as they approached Buckingham Palace. This trip had been Emma's one wish when the doctors had delivered the devastating news 3 months ago. The aggressive form of leukemia had progressed faster than anyone had anticipated, and the treatment options were becoming limited. When the Make-A-Wish Foundation had asked Emma what she wanted most in the world, her answer had surprised everyone. "I want to see the guards with the big fuzzy hats," she had whispered from her hospital bed. "The ones who protect the Queen? Are they real, or just pretend like in the movies?" Now, standing before the magnificent palace gates, Emma pressed her face against the iron bars, her breath creating small clouds in the chilly autumn air. The changing of the guard ceremony wouldn't begin for another hour, but she didn't mind waiting. She had dreamed of this moment during countless sleepless nights in the hospital, imagining what it would be like to see the famous beefeaters in their ceremonial uniforms. David, Emma's father, knelt beside his daughter and pointed toward the palace courtyard. "Look, sweetheart, can you see them? Those are the Queen's guards. Just like you wanted to see." His voice carried a mixture of joy and heartbreak that only a parent facing the unthinkable could understand. Emma's eyes grew wide as she spotted the first guard in his iconic red tunic and towering bearskin hat. She had seen pictures in books and on television, but nothing had prepared her for the real thing. The guard stood perfectly still, his rifle held at attention, his face stoic and professional beneath the shadow of his hat. "Daddy, why doesn't he move?" Emma whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might somehow break the magic of the moment. "It's his job to stand very still and protect the palace," David explained, his arm wrapping protectively around his daughter's small shoulders. "He's trained to be the best guard in the world." As more tourists gathered around them, Sarah noticed how Emma seemed to shrink back slightly from the crowds. The chemotherapy had weakened her immune system, making even simple outings like this one a calculated risk. But when the doctors had mentioned that time might be running short, both parents had agreed that fulfilling Emma's wish was worth any risk. Emma spent the next 30 minutes studying every detail of the guards she could see. She counted the buttons on their uniforms, marveled at the perfect shine of their boots, and tried to imagine how heavy their rifles must be. When a guard would occasionally turn his head or shift his weight, she would gasp with delight, as if witnessing the most extraordinary magic trick. "Mummy," Emma tugged on Sarah's coat. "Do you think they know we're here? Do you think they can see me through their big hats?" Sarah's throat tightened as she looked down at her daughter's hopeful face. "I think they can see everything that happens around the palace, sweetheart. They're very good at their job." As the morning progressed, more visitors arrived to witness the changing of the guard ceremony. Emma found herself pushed further back from the gates, her small stature making it difficult to maintain her view of the courtyard. She stood on her tiptoes, craning her neck to catch glimpses of the guards between the adults surrounding her. It was then that something unexpected happened. One of the guards, a tall man with kind eyes barely visible beneath his bearskin hat, seemed to notice the small girl struggling to see. For just a moment, his professional composure softened, and he made direct eye contact with Emma through the palace gates. Emma's entire face lit up with pure joy. She raised her small hand in a tentative wave, not sure if the guard would respond. To her amazement, the guard gave her the slightest nod of acknowledgement, so subtle that no one else in the crowd seemed to notice. That simple gesture would prove to be the beginning of something extraordinary. The guard who had noticed Emma was Sergeant James Mitchell, a 28-year-old soldier who had been serving with the Queen's Guard for 6 years. Behind his stern exterior and rigid military training, James possessed a gentle heart that had always drawn him to help others, especially children. As he maintained his post, he couldn't shake the image of the small girl in the red scarf who had waved at him with such innocent joy. During his brief rest period, James quietly spoke with his fellow guards about the little girl he had seen at the gates. When he described Emma's obvious illness and her family's devotion to making this trip special for her, Several of his colleagues shared his concern. These men, trained to be symbols of strength and discipline, were also fathers, brothers, and sons who understood the preciousness of childhood dreams. "Did you see how her face lit up when you nodded?" asked Corporal Williams, adjusting his uniform after their short break. "My daughter is about the same age. Can't imagine what that family is going through." James nodded solemnly. "It is to be something we can do to make this more special for her. She's traveled all this way, and you can tell this means everything to her family."
Meanwhile,
Emma and her parents had found a small cafe across from the palace where they could rest and have lunch while still maintaining a view of the guards. Emma barely touched her sandwich, too excited and mesmerized by the activity in the palace courtyard to eat. Every few minutes, she would press her face to the cafe window, making sure the guards were still there. "Are we going to stay until they change?" Emma asked, her voice filled with anticipation. "Of course, sweetheart," Sarah replied, though she was concerned about how tired Emma was becoming. The excitement and walking had drained her daughter's limited energy reserves, but she couldn't bear to disappoint her. After lunch, the family returned to their spot at the palace gates. The afternoon crowd was larger, and once again, Emma found herself struggling to see over the adults in front of her. David lifted her onto his shoulders, giving her a better view, but she could sense his fatigue as well. It was during this afternoon visit that James noticed the family's return. This time, he was positioned closer to the gates, and he could see Emma more clearly. The red scarf had shifted slightly, revealing the telltale signs of her medical condition, her pale complexion, and the way she seemed to lean heavily on her. Parents told him everything he needed to know about her situation. As James stood at attention, he began to formulate a plan. During the next scheduled rotation, he would speak with his commanding officer about the little girl at the gates. Surely there was something they could do within the bounds of protocol to make her visit more memorable. Emma spent another hour watching the guards, completely captivated by their precision and discipline. When one guard would move to a different position, she would track his progress with the intensity of a scientist studying a rare specimen. Her parents marveled at her focus and dedication, knowing that this simple pleasure was giving her more joy than any toy or game ever could. As the afternoon sun began to set, casting long shadows across the palace courtyard, Emma's energy started to fade. She had been standing and watching for most of the day, and the treatment schedule she was on required regular rest periods. Sarah gently suggested they return to their hotel to rest before dinner, promising they could come back the next morning. "But what if the guards aren't here tomorrow?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with worry. "They'll be here, sweetheart," David assured her. "They guard the palace every single day." As the family began to walk away from the palace gates, Emma turned back one last time to wave goodbye to the guards. James, who had been watching their departure, raised his hand in a small, discreet salute that only Emma could see. Her face broke into the biggest smile her parents had seen in months. That evening, as Emma slept soundly in their hotel room, Sarah and David sat quietly discussing their daughter's happiness. They hadn't seen her this animated and joyful since before her diagnosis. The simple act of seeing the guards had given her a sense of normalcy and wonder that all the medical treatments and hospital stays had temporarily taken away, unknown too. The family, James, was also having a significant conversation that evening. He had approached his superior officer with a special request, one that would require bending certain protocols, but could create a moment of magic for a little girl who desperately needed it. Captain Reynolds listened carefully as James explained the situation with Emma and her family. As a commanding officer, he was responsible for maintaining the strict protocols and traditions of the Queen's Guard. But he was also a compassionate man who had served his country for over 15 years. The request James was making was unusual, but the circumstances were extraordinary. "Tell me more about this little girl," Captain Reynolds said. Setting down his paperwork and giving James his full attention, James described Emma's obvious medical condition, her fascination with the guards, and the way her entire family seemed to revolve around making this experience special for her. He explained how she had spent the entire day watching them with pure joy and wonder, and how her parents appeared to be treasuring every moment of their daughter's happiness. "I know it's not standard procedure, but would it be possible to arrange something special for her tomorrow?" James asked. "Maybe allow her family to get a closer look at the ceremony, or perhaps have a brief interaction that would mean everything to her? Captain Reynolds considered the request carefully. The Queen's Guard had a reputation to maintain, and their duties were serious and sacred. However, he also understood that their role extended beyond simply protecting the monarchy. They were symbols of British values, including compassion and service to others. "What exactly did you have in mind, Sergeant Mitchell?" the captain asked. James outlined his idea. During the next day's changing of the guard ceremony, when the crowds would be at their largest, he proposed having one of the guards approach the family and present Emma with a small token of recognition. Nothing that would compromise their duties or create a spectacle, but something personal and meaningful that would acknowledge her presence and courage. Captain Reynolds smiled slightly. "You know, Sergeant, there have been precedent for such gestures. The Guard has always had a special relationship with the public, particularly with children who show such genuine appreciation for our service." The next morning, Emma woke up earlier than her parents, already dressed and ready to return to the palace. She had barely slept, too excited about seeing the guards again. Over breakfast at their hotel, she chattered constantly about everything she had observed the day before, recounting details that amazed her parents with their accuracy. "Did you see how shiny their boots were, Daddy? And the way they never moved their heads? Not even a tiny bit?" Emma's enthusiasm was infectious, and despite their exhaustion and worry, Sarah and David found themselves caught up in her excitement. When they arrived at Buckingham Palace, Emma immediately ran to the same spot at the gates where she had stood the day before. The morning guards were in position, and she began her careful observation routine once again. She had developed her own system of watching, noting which guards stood where and trying to memorize the details of their uniforms. James was among the guards on duty that morning, positioned strategically where he could see Emma and her family clearly. He had spoken with several of his colleagues about the plan Captain Reynolds had approved, and they were all committed to making the moment special for the little girl. As the morning progressed, the crowd began to gather for the changing of the guard ceremony. Emma found herself in the familiar position of being too short to see over the adults in front of her. This time, however, David's back was aching from the previous day's activity, and lifting Emma onto his shoulders for extended periods was becoming difficult. Sarah noticed Emma's frustration as she jumped and stretched, trying to catch glimpses of the guards between the bodies of taller spectators. "Can you see okay, sweetheart?" she asked, knowing the answer, but hoping to find a solution. "There are too many big people," Emma said quietly, her disappointment evident despite her efforts to remain cheerful. It was at that moment that James made his move. During a planned transition in the ceremony, he approached the palace gates with purposeful steps. The crowd noticed the guard walking directly toward them and automatically stepped aside, creating a clear path. James stopped directly in front of Emma and her family. In his full ceremonial uniform, with his bearskin hat adding to his impressive height, he was an imposing figure. But when he looked down at Emma, his eyes were warm and kind. "Young lady," James said in his official tone, loud enough for the surrounding crowd to hear, "I understand you've traveled a long way to see the Queen's Guard." Emma was speechless, her eyes wide with amazement that one of the guards was actually speaking directly to her. She nodded slowly, unable to find her voice. "Would you like to have a better view of today's ceremony?" James asked, maintaining his formal military bearing while speaking gently to the little girl. The crowd around them had grown quiet, sensing they were witnessing something special. Camera phones were raised, but the focus wasn't on creating a social media moment. Instead, people seemed to understand they were watching an act of pure kindness unfold. Emma finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Yes, please, sir." Her small hand instinctively reached for her mother's. Seeking comfort in this overwhelming but wonderful moment, James gestured toward a section of the palace courtyard that was typically reserved for official personnel. "If your parents agree, you and your family may watch the ceremony from inside the courtyard gates. You'll have the best view in all of London." Sarah and David exchanged amazed glances. They had expected nothing more than the opportunity to watch from behind the gates with hundreds of other tourists. This invitation was beyond anything they had hoped for or imagined possible. "Are you sure this is allowed?" Sarah asked quietly. not wanting to cause any problems for the kind guard who was making such a generous offer. The Queen's Guard has the authority to invite special guests when circumstances warrant it, James replied formally. And I believe these circumstances are quite special indeed. James led Emma and her parents through a side gate into the palace courtyard. The little girl's wonder was evident in every step she took. She walked carefully, as if afraid that moving too quickly might break the spell and end this magical experience. The red brick courtyard stretched out before them, and for the first time, she was seeing the guard's world from the inside. "Stay close to me," James instructed, his tone remaining professional, but his manner gentle. "The ceremony will begin in just a few minutes, and you'll want to see everything." Emma positioned herself where James indicated, giving her an unobstructed view of the entire ceremony preparation. She could see guards adjusting their uniforms, checking their equipment, and preparing for the precise choreography that was about to unfold. Every movement seemed to have a purpose. Every gesture was calculated and meaningful. "How long did it take you to learn all of this?" Emma asked James during a quiet moment. "Many months of training," James replied, "but it's worth it to serve the Queen and to meet brave young people like yourself." The word brave struck Emma as odd. She had never thought of herself as brave. The doctors were brave, her parents were brave for staying strong. But she felt like she was just trying to get through each day. Yet something about the way this impressive guard said it made her stand a little taller as the changing of the guard ceremony began. Emma watched with complete focus. From her privileged position, she could see details that no tourist had ever observed. She watched the guards communicate through subtle signals, noticed the precision of their synchronized movements, and marveled at the complexity of what appeared to be a simple ceremony. The music of the military band filled the courtyard, and Emma found herself swaying slightly to the rhythm. She had always loved music, and hearing it performed live by the military musicians was unlike anything she had experienced in her short life. The sound seemed to vibrate through her entire body, making her feel connected to something much larger than herself. David discreetly wiped away a tear as he watched his daughter's face throughout the ceremony. Emma was completely transfixed, her medical condition temporarily forgotten in the face of such magnificent pageantry. For 45 minutes, she wasn't a sick child facing an uncertain future. She was simply a little girl experiencing pure joy and wonder. When the ceremony concluded, James approached the family once more. "Emma," he said, using her name for the first time. Sarah realized she must have mentioned it earlier, though she couldn't remember when. "I have something for you," James continued, reaching into his uniform pocket. He pulled out a small, official-looking pin bearing the insignia of the Queen's Guard. "This is for you to keep, to remember your visit to Buckingham Palace." Emma's hands trembled as she accepted the pin. It was more than just a souvenir. It was a token of recognition from someone she had come to see as a real-life hero. The pin was heavy in her small palm, clearly made of quality metal rather than the lightweight tourist trinkets sold in nearby shops. "This is really for me to keep forever?" Emma asked, her voice filled with awe. "Forever," James confirmed. "And Emma, whenever you look at that pin, I want you to remember that you're one of the bravest people I've ever met." Again, there was that word, brave. Emma looked up at James, this tall, strong soldier who dedicated his life to protecting others, and she couldn't understand how he could see her as brave. But the sincerity in his eyes told her that he meant every word. "Thank you," Emma said simply. But the depth of gratitude in those two words conveyed far more than any elaborate speech could have. As the family prepared to leave the palace courtyard, James made one final gesture that would remain etched in their hearts forever. He removed his bearskin hat, revealing his face fully for the first time. Emma could see that he was younger than she had expected, with kind brown eyes and a warm smile that transformed his entire appearance. "But, Emma," James said, kneeling down to her eye level, "I want you to know that meeting you has been the highlight of my entire military career. Your courage and joy have reminded me why I'm proud to wear this uniform." Emma reached out and gently touched the bearskin hat that James held in his hands. The fur was softer than she had imagined, and she marveled at how heavy it must be to wear all day long. "Does it ever get hot under there?" she asked with the innocent curiosity that only a child could express. James laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise him as much as it delighted Emma. Very hot, he admitted. But when I see young people like you watching us with such appreciation, it makes everything worthwhile. As they walked toward the exit, Emma turned back several times to wave at James and the other guards who had made her experience so special. Each time she received small nods and subtle acknowledgments that made her feel like she was part of an exclusive club. The journey back to their hotel was filled with Emma's nonstop chatter about every detail of the morning. She described the ceremony from her unique perspective, recounted every word James had spoken to her, and clutched the guard pin as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. That evening, Emma carefully pinned the Queen's Guard insignia to her favorite stuffed animal, a small bear she had named Winston after reading about Winston Churchill in one of her hospital books. Now Winston can be brave like the guards, she explained to her parents. Over dinner at a small restaurant near their hotel, Emma's appetite was better than it had been in weeks. The excitement and joy of the day seemed to have given her an energy boost that even her parents noticed. She ate most of her meal and talked animatedly about everything she wanted to remember from their London adventure. "Can we write a letter to James?" Emma asked as they prepared for bed. "I want to thank him properly." Sarah helped Emma compose a letter that night, writing down her daughter's words exactly as she spoke them. The letter was simple and sincere, filled with the genuine gratitude of a child who had been given an extraordinary gift. Emma drew a picture to accompany the letter, showing herself standing next to a tall guard in front of Buckingham Palace. Meanwhile, back at the palace, James was finishing his evening duties with a lighter heart than he had carried in months. His fellow guards had heard about Emma's reaction to the ceremony and the gift, and several of them commented on how the little girl's joy had affected the entire unit's morale. "You did something really special today," Corporal Williams told James as they secured their equipment for the night. "That little girl will never forget what you did for her." James nodded, but he was thinking about Emma's words to him. She had thanked him for being brave, not realizing that she had shown him what real courage looked like. Facing each day with terminal illness while maintaining such enthusiasm and joy required a type of bravery that no military training could teach. 3 days later, Emma and her family returned home, carrying with them memories that would last far beyond anything the doctor's timelines could predict. Emma immediately set up a special display in her bedroom featuring the guard pin, photographs from their trip, and the letter they had mailed to James before leaving London. Back at school, when Emma felt strong enough to attend, she became something of a celebrity among her classmates. She shared stories about the Queen's Guards with such vivid detail and enthusiasm that her teacher asked her to give a presentation to the entire class. Emma stood at the front of the room, the guard pin proudly displayed on her shirt, and spoke with the confidence of someone who had experienced something truly remarkable. "Guards are the bravest people in the world," Emma told her classmates. "But they told me that I'm brave too. Sometimes being brave just means keeping going when things are hard." Her words resonated with children and adults alike, spreading far beyond her classroom as teachers and parents shared Emma's simple but profound message about courage and perseverance. 2 weeks after returning from London, Emma received an unexpected package in the mail. The return address showed it was from Buckingham Palace, and Emma's excitement was so intense that her hands shook as Sarah helped her open it carefully. Inside was a formal letter from Captain Reynolds, written on official palace letterhead, along with a photograph that took Emma's breath away. The photo showed her standing next to James in the palace courtyard, both of them smiling broadly. She didn't even remember when it had been taken, but someone had captured the perfect moment of connection between the young girl and the soldier. The letter read, "Dear Emma, Sergeant Mitchell has told us about your visit and your remarkable courage. The entire Queen's Guard unit has been inspired by your story. We wanted you to know that you will always be considered an honorary member of our regiment. Your bravery in the face of adversity exemplifies the very qualities we strive to embody as guardsmen." But the most touching part of the package was a handwritten note from James himself. "Dear Emma, thank you for your beautiful letter and drawing. They are displayed in our common room where all the guards can see them. You reminded me that our job isn't just about standing at attention or following protocol. It's about serving others and spreading hope wherever we can. You've taught me that sometimes the teacher becomes the student. Please keep being brave and know that all of us at Buckingham Palace are cheering for you." Emma read and reread every word until she had memorized both letters. She carried them with her to medical appointments, showing them to nurses and doctors who were amazed by the story. The letters seemed to give Emma strength during her most difficult treatments, serving as a reminder that she had touched the lives of others simply by being herself as months passed. Emma's condition stabilized in ways that surprised her medical team. While they couldn't credit her improved spirits entirely to the London trip, they acknowledged that hope and joy were powerful medicines that complemented her physical treatments. Emma's positive attitude became legendary in the pediatric ward, inspiring other young patients and their families. James, meanwhile, found that his encounter with Emma had changed his perspective on his military service. He began volunteering with children's charities during his leave time, using his status as a Queen's Guard to bring joy to young people facing various challenges. He often told Emma's story with her family's permission, to demonstrate how small acts of kindness could create ripple effects far beyond what anyone might imagine. 1 year later, Emma returned to London for a follow-up visit. Her treatment had been successful, and while she would need continued monitoring, her prognosis had improved dramatically. This time, when she stood at the gates of Buckingham Palace, she wasn't the same frail little girl who had first pressed her face against the iron bars. James happened to be on duty that day, and when he saw Emma approaching with her parents, he couldn't hide his smile. Her hair had grown back, fuller and darker than before. The red scarf was gone, replaced by a bright blue coat that matched her eyes. Most importantly, she walked with the confident stride of a child who had faced the unthinkable and emerged victorious. "Sergeant Mitchell." Emma called out, no longer the shy, whispered child she had been during their first meeting. This time, James didn't need permission from his commanding officer to approach the family. Emma's story had become well known throughout the regiment, and her return visit was considered a celebration worthy of bending protocol once again. "Emma," James said, his voice filled with genuine happiness. "Look at you. You're absolutely radiant." Emma proudly showed James the guard pin, which she still wore on special occasions. "I kept it safe," she said, "and I kept being brave, just like you told me to." "I can see that," James replied, "but I think you were teaching me about bravery long before I ever taught you anything." As Emma and her family toured London on this return visit, they reflected on how a simple childhood wish had created connections that transcended military protocol, social boundaries, and even medical limitations. Emma's encounter with the Queen's Guards had given her more than just a memorable experience. It had provided her with a sense of purpose, a understanding of her own strength, and proof that kindness between strangers could create magic in the most unexpected places. The story of Emma and the Queen's Guards spread far beyond London, becoming a reminder that heroism comes in many forms, and sometimes the smallest acts of compassion can change lives in ways that last forever.